What's up, guys? It's Brian here. Today, we're going to be looking at the highlights of the final round of the US Open. I'm going to be focusing in pretty specifically on Rory's round. I'll talk a little bit about the course and my general thoughts there, and maybe a couple of the other players. But I really wanted to focus in on some of the situations that Rory found himself in throughout and talk about, I think, what the narrative is, generally speaking, with Rory and what happened in his final round. So obviously, you look at the two big putts that he missed, the two short putts that otherwise he's been very good at. And I think that's going to stick out in people's minds. But if you go through his stats, he gained a lot of strokes off the tee. He was okayish with his approach, but not really super sharp. His around the green was fantastic, so he was chipping the ball great. And then his putting was for 3 days, he putted amazing, and that was including Sunday, where he gained over 2 strokes putting with 2 putts that were missed from around the 3 to 4 foot range, which would lose him some strokes. And um, so he putted well, and he chipped it well, he drove it well. The approach just was sort of a glaring weakness, especially when you consider when you're hitting the ball as well as you are off the tee, you're giving yourself a lot of these short clubs and then you're not sticking anything. That's really going to stand out to people. It's different than when you're hitting, 5 and 6 irons and you're not getting things close. It's just kind of like, okay, well, it is what it is. But with wedge in hand, you're expecting at least a couple tap ins at this level if you're going to have a bunch of them throughout the day. Now, granted, this is a US Open setup, and some of the hole locations are quite treacherous, and so you may not be aiming at many of these holes. But again, if we had to really focus in on something and say it wasn't sharp, to me, it's the approach game. Given that, that said, I really think he had a tremendous round. He put himself in position to win the golf tournament. And I think he has one really bad break. He has maybe shouldn't have hit the ball as far by, but then again, he left himself with a short putt that he, again, maybe lost a little bit of focus on. Then on the par three, which we'll talk about, he, I think, doesn't hit it where he should. And then finally on 18, he gets a little unlucky with where the ball ends up relative to where everyone else's ball was ending up. It forced him to have a little chip, and then he chipped it really well, and then missed a hard putt, I would say, especially under pressure, given what's going on, both with his round and with what the tournament means for him, and et cetera, et cetera. But um, I think you have to look pretty positively, especially if you're Rory. I think you have to really take a fairly positive stance on the round itself and the tournament itself. He played really, really well. He was a few strokes back, and if he changes a few things, he runs away with it, more or less. So I think some of the narrative needs to change a little bit once put into perspective. And going through some of these shots that we're going to go through, I hope that's um, kind of what we get to. So, one of the first holes I want to dig into with Rory's round here is the par 5 fifth. He hits an amazing drive. The green kind of, or this hill kind of runs to his left. The front of the green runs to his left, and then it flattens out up here. Um, he's expecting if he hits it kind of long back here, he's fine. If he hits it short, he's fine. There really isn't too much of a consequence to this shot, so you might as well give it a go. Ball above the feet lie, so it's a little bit more draw biased. His feet are aimed out to the left again, and um, he hits a really quality shot here. In terms of the magnitude of the situation, in terms of the quality of strike, this is one of the worst breaks out there. So he gets to about here, and it's about to turn its nose and go the other way. But if it had gone another, I don't know exactly where the flat starts. I'm guessing based off of some of the coloring of the green. It crests the hill about here and then is flattish in there. Um, if he gets another 6 feet, maybe it's a really quality look for eagle. And um, even if it just kind of rolls off to here, with the way his short game is, he could chip it in for eagle. And either way, you're kind of expecting that just based off of how good he hit this and where it probably is going to end up, that he has at minimum birdie and at absolute worst, he has par. So what happens next as a result of that? So that actually got up farther than I thought it did. That's even closer to where it looks like it starts to go downhill again. Um, so maybe he's a couple feet from being really good. But either way, it starts to turn, and really, it took him getting all the way up to that spot, and then not cresting to get what's about to happen to him. So this thing's just going to keep going, and if you take a look at this spot right here, I mean, that looks like it's about to run straight into the bunker. And again, from right here, if it had run in here, he's on a slight upslope going back towards that flag. He may not have been overly cute with the shot, but he certainly is a really quality bunker player. Would have had a chance to stop that at least somewhat close. So again, another decent opportunity at birdie. But instead, it comes within inches of falling in and is going to walk that tightrope and start trickling down into a little washed out area. And the ball is going to kind of oscillate here and then roll into a little depression, a little dimple right there. Um, from this view, you can see just how bad of a lie it is for the shot he has to hit. And also, again, given where the ball just was and how good he had hit it, this just seems, like one of the worst breaks you can get. So the next portion of this is where I might be kind of reading a little too much into it, but I think I'm not alone in this thought. So a while back, Rory changed caddies, and it's not my place to really have a judgment on that. I'm not in Rory's camp. I don't know anything about the situation. There's obviously a reason why Rory decided to do what he did, to have a friend on his bag as opposed to taking someone that is a more seasoned caddy. Um, with that said, it was kind of a little bit, um, at least concerning. And I don't say that as, again, trying to be the smartest person in the room, but just saying it from a place of concern because I like Rory's game. It's fun to watch. I pull for him. I want him to win. Um, and then I kind of let it go because obviously that's been a while since that happened. And then watching this tournament, and it was specifically in this moment where some of those feelings kind of bubbled back up. There are times where Rory looks like he's alone on an island. And what I mean by that is when you watch other players and their caddies, so if you watch any of the featured group coverage, whether it's like the US Open, the Masters, the ESPN Plus coverage, you get a lot of that time to listen to what the player and caddy are talking about, how they're talking in between shots. And at times, Rory seems like he's kind of on his own. And I know in some moments that's not true. They often kind of talk in between shots, but there are times where when a situation like this, for instance, it just looked like Rory was kind of on his own in making the decisions here. And I'll also add in that a lot of times with short game shots, the caddies will kind of take a back seat because it's feel based and it's more about what the player wants in this situation than yardages and strategy and that kind of stuff. So maybe this wouldn't have come up even if Rory did have a different caddy. But I was watching him make this decision, and it really did kind of feel like, and maybe it's because I was watching the law and I wanted to say something, but it just reminded me of that. And then again, what happens later in the round makes me want to bring it up now that I was kind of thinking it here. And I'll run through my thought process on this. So when you watch Rory's eyes here, so he's going to take a look. He's looking out here. This launch direction, I think, is supposed to be here. If he launches it over here, it can catch this hill, it'll catch the false front, and his best shot is going to really roll up and probably end 12 feet away from the hole out to the right. And I think his worst shot skips through this and just goes to the back right somewhere. The problem is this lie in particular for two reasons. One, the ball's below his feet. And a lot of times when people think about lie angles, similarly to the second shot that he hit, the ball's above your feet, the face is more closed, the ball's going to go more left, just through the lie angle. The ball below your feet, people think it's just the opposite. Because the ball's below my feet, the face is going to be more right pointed or more open, and thus is going to go more right. The problem with that thought process is that it's harder to get fully adjusted to a ball below your feet lie, whereas a ball above your feet lie, you can stand up. So you can stand up and really match the slope. Ball below your feet, it's very hard to get your weight kind of over your toes enough to get the shaft tall enough to where the club fully matches the slope. So what's going to happen, or what can happen, is the heel will dig on these lies and the face will close. So sometimes it's ball above your feet, face closes, and ball below your feet, face also closes. Secondly, because Rory is really trying to get the club up so that he can get down on the ball, so he's trying to avoid this stuff that's behind the ball, so that he can make really clean contact and ensure that he knows how it's going to come out. Also, it helps with this run shot that we talked about. He pitches the club straight up, so he's got a lot of wrist set. The club is very much over the hands, and the problem with that, while it does help with the contact, it's very easy from here to shift the path more left than what you would with a more normal stroke or more normal wrist set, rate of wrist set, or more normal pitch of the shaft. So you've got the potential for the heel to dig. You've got the potential for, as soon as he starts turning here, to bias the path more left. And you'll see exactly that. He succeeds at getting ball first. He succeeds at getting the ball to kind of come out low so as to take more of the slope. But he does not succeed, as far as I'm reading it, with his start direction. Again, in my opinion, his eyes were over here. The ball's launching right here. And again, he's about to get unlucky. This very easily could have caught this, rolled back in, and then he has a, to me, slightly easier bunker shot. But I think the biggest takeaway from this situation is I very much wish that someone had been there in this moment to kind of at least remind him of, or allow him to kind of bounce ideas off of and talk through the situation, so that he might have foreseen this coming out more left and maybe biased his aim even more to the right. Because at worst, if this ball goes even more to the right, I still think he has an easier shot than he has from over here. And maybe he saw this as potential and maybe he preferred that. And if that's the case, then that's fine. That's the player's choice. If he didn't, again, that works back to maybe this would have worked out better if there was a better system in place, or a more, I don't want to say forceful, but more present voice beside him in this moment. So the ball is going to go up because the hill caught it a lot. It slows it down a bunch and it just turns straight left instead of going farther back. He again is going to have a ball that is below his feet. Um, I think it's like it's hard to tell whether it's slightly pitched down or it's slightly pitched up, but the ball's below his feet, which again, just like we talked about, makes it a little bit harder. So this side right here seems a little bit higher than this side. So it's going to make it a little tougher to get exactly on the ball and play this as spinny as he normally would. Also, the hole location is closer to this false front. And so he's not going to feel super comfortable playing a shot that lands close to the hole. So he can't spin it a ton and he can't just land it at the hole. So obviously, he's got to play this farther by, and he does a fantastic job at that. He's again a great bunker player, and given the situation, this is about as good as you can ask for. But again, I just want to rewind to the fact that his eagle putt could be coming from somewhere over here. If he had played this little recovery chip shot better, his birdie putt could be over here to in here. And he's, either eagle tap in birdie, birdie tap in par, but instead, we're gonna have this putt that just isn't very makeable. Credit to him, he almost does make it, and then he taps in for a very, 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 very unfortunate bogey. The only again criticism you can have is that recovery shot, which is, to be fair, slightly unpredictable in how it's going to come out. So it's hard to fault him a ton for this hole, but if we could criticize anything, it would be that third shot. One of the next shots I wanted to talk about is the tee shot on the par 3 ninth. And the hole location is here. The feet are more, they're still slightly open, but they don't appear to be as open as they were with the wedges. And that would lead you to believe that this is going to be more of a draw, less of a push fade. It does still push out to the right a decent amount and draws in. And what I'm about to say may be completely unfair. Um, it's more of just a thought in general about working the ball. I would imagine this is more of like Rory's stock shot shape. I feel comfortable in saying that at least. And he does a good job landing that hole high. He controls the distance very well. And there is an interesting thought here about, should you really aim left and try to push it in there, or should you, I mean, generally with some of the other shots he's hitting, or should you just aim more at the hole with the draw tendency and let the draw work away from the flag or work away from the hole location, rather than changing the shot shape completely to something that starts to add in variance in regards to something like loft or efficiency, and therefore potentially making it harder to judge both how far it's going to curve and how far the ball is going to land. Now, I trust Rory's skills to be able to read the situation, to determine whether he wants to hit a fade or not, the ability to then execute on the fade, the ability to know the distance that that's going to land. Like, I trust his preparation. I trust all of that. Um, it is just an interesting thought, though, when you see a hole location that is right. Sometimes guys will play left and, or aim left rather, and then kind of try to push or fade it into there versus just accepting that your draw is working away from the hole, but maybe you have a little bit more consistency throughout the round and playing that draw just because that's the shot you hit all the time. I don't know that that fits totally with the professional game. Um, I don't know. I don't really know what the full answer is there. Maybe in situations it makes sense to do the draw. Maybe in situations it makes sense to do the fade. Maybe in theory it makes sense just to play the same shot all day long, with the exception of when there's a wind that's really right to left or left to right. Um, but it would be something to think about, and it would be really interesting to hear Rory's thoughts on that and what he's doing with his iron game in regards to aiming left and hitting some of these with fades, and then in this situation aiming a little tighter to the hole and then playing a push draw. Another little interesting tidbit with Rory is with his putting, his left knee is often a little bit more bent than his right knee is. And during the follow through, or like as he's going into the follow through, this left knee extends just a little bit. That's interesting because he has a tendency to, or at least in the past has. I haven't paid a ton of attention to his putting, to be fair, but he's had a tendency to hit slightly above the equator. And given what he does with his left knee, it's kind of interesting that he does that. Whether that's a good thing, bad thing, that would take a lot more insight from him and a lot more work on his actual putting. Like you would have to be a putting coach and work with him on it enough to know whether it's something that, maybe it's good most of the time and then sometimes that gets worse. But it's just interesting to watch. Most of the time you would think of the lower body with putting being very stable, and then you see his left knee kind of pop up there a little bit. But again, this kind of showcases his how well he was putting on the day, and the fact that he was gaining strokes. Here's another really good look at the aim lines that Rory is taking with some of these short irons and his wedges. So the flag is right here, just right of the tower. And if we look at his feet, and sometimes camera angles and some other stuff can make this harder to tell exactly what's going on, but his feet are aimed quite left. I mean, his feet are like, even if we're generous, his feet are aimed somewhere over here. He's got a fairly high lofted club. This is not going to curve to the right very much. Now, again, keep in mind that this section of the green is probably safer than this section of the green. So maybe he's thinking at best, I want the ball to end up in here. Like if he hits an absolutely perfect shot, the ball is going to end up here, which is completely fine. That is totally acceptable. But even there, feet over here, that kind of influences the path a little bit left. He starts it there-ish, and then it's got to cut over there. Given the tendencies on the day, I don't know about the tendencies in general that he's trying to fight. Maybe this makes the most sense and it gave him the best ability to play golf um, this week. But it's just really interesting, given the fact that he's often, and again, maybe I'm being a little unfair there, but just from what I've seen, it seems like he's, it's not curving a ton to the right, and at times it's coming up a little bit short. So I would imagine, again, maybe his absolute perfect shot is right here, given this situation. He may totally say that's wrong and that he was here or even more there. It didn't seem like he was super happy with the shot, so I don't think I'm reading a ton into this or too much into this. Um, I would imagine, again, this is what he was looking for, and he misses over here again, which we're going to see on 17 as well. Hole 15 is where I think the caddy situation has to be taken very seriously. And if it's not a caddy situation, then it kind of falls on Rory. But again, being nice about it, I think I'm being nice about it. I'm trying to be nice about it. I just think it's really hard to argue that this isn't a very, very, very big mistake given the gravity of the situation, given the situation that we're in, given that this hole's likely not going to lead to a ton of birdies, given that the rest of the round isn't going to lead to a lot of birdies, given the fact that Rory's chipping the ball so well. I mean, like, you can just put so many things here on the table and everything tells you one thing and then another thing happens. And unfortunately, this coverage that I have doesn't show Rory's shot, nor do I have an insight as to what the conversation looked like between Rory and his caddy. But what happens to me is just catastrophic. And we're going to watch Patrick's shot here to kind of illustrate what both Patrick and Pavone both hit this shot exactly the same. In my opinion, Again, given everything I've said leading up to this and what you see here with Patrick, given what you'll see with Pavone, um, I think that a decent percentage of Rory's shots here in this scenario should end up off the front edge of the green. Given that if some chunk of his shots end up off of the green, another chunk is going to land here-ish. But I think in your mind, you have to be playing about where Patrick's ball is here, is the absolute max land distance. And I wouldn't leave that up to hitting a specific shot trying to take off that distance. I absolutely would say that is a club decision. You have to, with your club selection, not let any balls land past this point. And the reason for that is this shot is fairly easy. Again, not necessarily for me or not for anyone else, but it's easy given the fact that Rory has absolutely been putting on a clinic with his short game. And you're going to see, even if you land here, it turns out fine. Pavone lands on just a little bit farther than that and has a very short putt for birdie. It's not as if trying to land it short leads to no opportunity to make a birdie. But then we see here what the alternative is. When you allow, through your club selection, through your shot selection, whatever it happens to be, unless there's just some giant gust of wind that happened at Rory's back in the middle of his swing, there was a major issue here. And because they did not strategize around taking this out of the equation, he now has another unpredictable shot versus if he had landed it short, it would have been more predictable. He now has to know that he can't get on the back of the ball. He can't hit this high without the chance of it landing right here and coming right back to him and really bringing in a big number. So he's got to take it steep again. He's got to try to drive it into this hill, not knowing exactly if this is going to slow down the club at all. So again, he has to, even on this, taking it up and trying to punch it down, he still has to try to hit it hard on the off chance that it comes out kind of slow. He has to get it up this. And so he does a fairly good job taking his medicine here. But now we've just hit this shot back to where the first shot could have ended up. And this isn't a lesson that, and you can see the lie here, and how much he had to come in steep, and then still there's going to be stuff trapped between the ball and the face because of how tall this grass is. You know, he's still going to have stuff in there between the ball and the face. So taking off spin, I mean, he look, from that situation, he had to do what he did. It's just that front side of the green just was such a great spot to leave that ball, for every reason again that I've mentioned, and I'm beating a bit of a dead horse, but it's just everyone I think is going to focus in on the short putt he's about to miss on the next hole, and obviously the putt on 18 because of the situation. But to me, this is the greatest flaw of the round. It just was absolutely unforced. It didn't need to happen. And in my opinion, it cost him the tournament because what's going to happen in this sequence of events, and Rory can't know this, no one can know this. He's at 8 under right now. If he had made a par, he stays at 8 under, obviously. Bryson's going to come in and drop to 6. So now he's going into 16, 17, 18 with a 2-stroke lead. And even if he does what he does on 16, he still has a stroke lead, et cetera, et cetera. I just don't think the pressure starts getting in his head as much as it might have, given what's about to happen here. And again, keep in mind, he could have even birdied this going short. So he could even be leaving this green 9 under. and then it really doesn't matter what he does from here on out. So he either leaves this with like a 2-shot lead or a 3-shot lead, and then I just don't think any of those other shots really are that pressure filled. Obviously, there's some pressure, but not as much pressure as like, okay, now I'm bleeding strokes and I'm trying to win the US Open. So if you take anything away from any of this, it's just like how catastrophic a less than thought through shot can be in a situation like this. Hole 17 now, it's another par three. Rory's feet, again, are aimed left by what seems like a decent amount. And I don't know if this ball is supposed to be a bigger cut. It's just supposed to be a push. I don't know what about this green complex he likes or doesn't like. I don't know where exactly you should be in this moment. Maybe where he hits it is completely fine. It seems like a spot you wouldn't want to be in, but again, I don't know enough about it to make a really educated statement here, other than to just point out again his feet are aimed fairly left, and it seems like I'm guessing he's trying to hit a push fade into this hole location. The ball, I don't know if it started. It's just hard to see from these camera angles whether that started a little bit too far left and then is like fading a yard, or if it started kind of on line and is drawing. But you'll see where it lands that it's kind of based off of that. I'm guessing it was kind of drawing a little bit, which again, the feeder aim left. He likes to hit draws. I don't know if there's something there, but he ends up kind of somewhat short sighted. So there's not a ton of room here. And he also is fairly close to the hole location in general, which means he can't produce a lot of speed here. To his credit, he's just made 2 bogeys that he won't like. I mean, he's not going to like any bogey. He especially does not like those 2 bogeys. There's the overarching narrative of it's been forever since he's won a major. He's put himself in a great spot to win this one. He knows all that. All of that's rolling around in his head, and then he has this shot, and it's a very tough shot. And he just absolutely clutches up and hits an amazing shot. And the way he does it, I think, is interesting. This isn't a shot that you're going to spin, like I was saying before. He's going to take it kind of out and go really across it into the finish with the face open, so he's really deadening the efficiency off of the face. It's going to come out really, really dead and just kind of land short. Rory, in my opinion, if you know anything about his bunker game, I think the most beautiful shots he hits are those ones where he gets really close to the ball and it spins a lot, carries almost all the way to the flag and then spins a lot. And he doesn't really have that in this situation. Can't hit that shot in this situation. And again, it's under pressure, and he just, I mean, that's phenomenal. Like, that's really, really cool, that shot that he just hit. And then he's going to make that and be, make his par and still be at 6. And then, move on to 18, tied with Bryson. We're on 18 now, and Rory has driver in hand. I don't know exactly what's going on with this hole. It seemed like everyone hit driver on this hole. On the, I think it was the Sky broadcast that I was listening to, I think they were saying that Rory had played less than driver here. I could be wrong about that. I wouldn't take too much, or I wouldn't think too much about that comment, other than, again, he hasn't been super awesome with short iron in his hand. If there is some sort of advantage in hitting 3-wood or a driving iron or something like that off of this tee, and it doesn't really change too much with the approach, maybe you do that. Maybe driver is the right play here, considering that's what everyone else is playing. It just would be interesting to hear his thought process on why driver is necessary here. But again, feet are aimed left by a decent amount, so this is, to me, going to be one of those more of push cut, less draw. And again, it goes straight to a little left. Again, tough to tell. It looks like it's falling left, but it could have been just straight without the fade. You can see the lie here, all this stuff in front. You don't know where it's going to go. you can't overcommit to hitting this just super, super hard because of what's behind. Um, it's just unfortunate. And, you're going to see the shot he hits. Um, it just kind of chases up there, which not the worst. It definitely could have ended up worse than that. So, and you can see the ball kind of go through this stuff and slow it down a bunch. So that's what would have caused it to come up short. But it's not the worst thing that could have happened to him. His chipping has been incredible. He's going to step up here and hit this shot really well, even though, again, it could have been on the green. And again, putting for birdie, tap in par. He gives himself, again, essentially a tap in par here. One of the conversations that you'll hear a lot, sometimes with announcers or with just kind of average golfers that will look at this, one of the things that people always say is you want to leave it below the hole. You want to give yourself that uphill putt. And I don't want to get into it too much other than to say that that's not true. He's left himself with 3-foot putt, 4-foot putt, whatever it is. If you imagine that his spread, so anytime you hit any any shot, you're going to have a spread. Like if you hit 100 shots and then you draw a circle, or what it's actually going to be is an oval around those outcomes, there's going to be some spread to it. With a chip and a pitch, there isn't going to be much lateral spread. It's all going to be vertical. And so let's say that his spread from this distance is like 6 feet. So he aims for the middle of the cup, and he's going to hit some at max, like 3-4 feet past, and he's going to hit some at max 3 and 4 feet short, throwing out the anomalies, of course. That gives him a lot of makeable putts. If he said in his head, okay, absolutely none of these balls get past the hole, so my max distance is 2 feet short. Well, what that gives you is his best shot, which is going to be the longest of the bunch, is going to be 2 feet. And then his shortest of the bunch is going to be at 8 feet. And even if it's uphill, and there's a little bit of variance there because we're talking about a specific point in time and who knows how someone is going to react. If it was 8 feet uphill, he might have made it and missed this downhill or side hill 4-footer, but it wouldn't be because of the odds of it. It would be just because that's the way it worked. And that could always be true. He could have chipped that ball in. Anything could have happened. But just in general, an 8-foot putt, just because it's uphill, is not easier than a 4-foot putt because it's downhill, even when it's fast and across a slope. That's just the way it is. You do not want to scare yourself out of hitting the appropriate weight for this hole because you're trying to give yourself an uphill putt. So here on the final putt, I think where Rory starts, and I have this in slow-mo and or a slow playback speed, and it's a little hard to tell, but I think the putter is aimed roughly there-ish. And I think that's okay. I think it's decent. Maybe it's a little bit more right than that, but I think that's fairly decent. And before I move on with this, I wanted to talk about this a little bit from the player's perspective. And a lot of people struggle with doing this. I would say the average player, just in general, struggles with aiming outside of the hole. So first, I would say, when the putt breaks, you've got to trust aiming outside of the cup if necessary. The hill's going to take it. We don't always want to be aimed at the middle of the cup and then try to change the stroke to make up for the fact that we're aimed poorly. Secondly, I see this a lot, even with better players. When we have a short putt, the hole's really close to us. It's very easy to get over this ball and have your brain start screaming at you that, like, no, we should not be aimed this far away from the hole, given that we're this close. And I think you need to have a little logic mantra or a little logic bomb to drop on yourself in this moment. And you're going to develop this in practice by going into a situation like this. Go to a practice green, find a little short putt that's kind of steep across a slope, and show yourself this little piece of information. Okay. The reason that a putt breaks is one, because of the slope, the slope's direction, the amount of slope, and also how long the ball spins on that slope. And in this situation, even if it weren't a little downhill, at 3 to 4 feet, it still has time to break. And you can prove that to yourself, that even from that distance, the putt has time to break. And then secondly, if it is downhill, you now can even tell yourself, hey, look, I'm also hitting this slower. So it's going to get to the hole, it's going to take longer for the ball to get to the hole. So then it has even more time to break on top of the fact that it has time to break. And you can settle yourself down by having that in the back of your head, ready to use in that moment where you're starting to scare yourself off of the line. So when we look at Rory, I think he's aimed well, and this is going to be a little hard to show, but I think as he's setting up, I think the putter fidgets just a little bit. And I think right in here, it's aimed just a tiny bit more to the right than what it was. Like right there, I think it just moved a fraction. And then I'll freeze it once we start to go back. I don't think Rory's stroke is as good as a stroke that he had earlier, and I'll show that. But if we look at, so I'm going to just kind of place the cursor kind of on the middle of his putter and start to play it, you'll see I think it just drifted slightly more to the inside than where it was. So I'll play that again, and we'll take a look at it. So I'll kind of mark that again. I think he gets right here, and it drifts just a little bit more inside right there than where it was. I think somewhere in the middle of the stroke, he kind of decommitted, and it may have been happening as he was setting up. My eyes may be playing tricks on me, and he didn't aim it more right. But I definitely kind of see it in the stroke that this shifts under a little bit, so it kind of falls a little bit closer to his toes, shifting the path a little bit more to the right. And I would just imagine that this is a little bit of a decommit, because I don't think the speed is all that bad. And even then, I don't think the putt is all that bad. He's still, it hits the edge. So he's just a tiny, tiny, tiny little fraction off from this putt going in. But I do think, when you look at that other putt, I do think the other one was a little bit more committed in trying to get the ball to start left. And this one fell just a little bit more to the inside and kind of helped it just a little bit, just enough to get it to miss. And even if that isn't true, again, I still think it's a decent attempt given the pressure, given everything that he's been through. And I just don't see it as being the. Obviously, it was the thing that kept him out of a playoff, but I don't think it's the thing that kept him from winning. I think, he ran into a little bit of bad luck. And then the club decision on the par three, potentially the decision making on the recovery shot on the par five, where he did get that bad break. I think those two things lead to him being in this situation where he has to make this to go into a playoff. But, I think otherwise, if those other two situations happen differently, he misses this, and I still think he taps in to win.